Hi, and welcome to Clark's Chair. In Clark's Chair, we'll be talking about how people's jobs and their livelihood has been affected around the world. I'll be talking to friends and family about how their jobs have changed. But today, we'll be talking to Mr. Tevez, who is the sports director at Singapore American School. We talk about how his job has changed and how he has to adhere to government protocols and how much he listens to the government, but also how he references other schools in the Southeast Asian area and how he's also looked at the NBA bubble and how that's changed his perspective on how he can do sports in COVID. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Tevez, for doing this with me. So, just before kind of COVID and like stuff like that, like you're the sports director here at SAS, right? Like for high school?
Yeah.
So-
I work in the activities and athletics office, and Miss V and I organize all the co-curricular programs before and after school for high school students.
And so before COVID, you were here for how long before COVID?
Before COVID hit, I was here for approximately 6 months.
Right.
Things went into full lockdown in April of my first year.
Right.
So we were able to get in a normal season 1 and a normal season 2.
Okay.
And then season 3 was impacted by the fact that we were not able to bring opposition onto the campus.
Okay.
The team still practiced,
Yeah.
and there were no restrictions with regard to practice. There was no mask wearing. There were no pods. The only thing that changed was no more external competition.
So then once the circuit breaker hit here in Singapore, kind of the rest of the world followed.
Mm-hmm.
Over the circuit breaker, like what were you kind of doing to like were you organizing stuff or trying to do stuff for sports?
Yeah, so during circuit breaker, what would have normally been happening on campus would be intramurals, which is open to all students. There's no cuts, there's no teams. It's just an opportunity for kids to come together before the end of the school year to participate in whatever form of activity they want to do. We could not do that, so what we offered in place was some group fitness opportunities for students. Only a handful of people participated in that. In the whole enrollment, we had I think 20 students participating, and
Right.
and that was, I suppose, to be expected, considering people were spending a lot of time on screens already during circuit breaker. And I think the last thing some kids wanted to do was spend even more time on a Zoom call, even though
Yeah.
it was for exercise. The kids that did it really enjoyed it, and they were consistently participating. However, I completely got it. It was an option that people could participate in, but I understood why the uptake was relatively low.
Right, and I know like the rest of the world had to adapt to something they've never done before, like even the professional like teams and stuff. Like probably not in the US, but I know in the UK personally, like the Premier League and stuff, like because they had a huge lockdown in England, it was hard for them to like do anything.
Yeah.
So were there anybody like you were like reaching out to and stuff to like get help and see like things you could do, like maybe here at SAS or not here at SAS?
Yeah, sure. I'm part of a number of organizations and friend support groups, I suppose, where we were just sharing information. A lot of the stuff was directed at individuals to do their own workouts at home in a confined space. So I know a good friend of mine who's the AD at Manila. He showed me some programs that they were running, and we ran some similar things. It really just depended on the context with which each country was working. Like some countries were still a lot more open than others. Others were in full lockdown. Some you could leave your house to exercise. Others you had to stay in the house the whole time. So, we just worked within our constraints. During circuit breaker, students could still leave the house to go for a run or go to a park and do some exercise independently. So our programs were catered and geared towards that. And yeah, I guess the world watched as big tournament and big league and the Olympics.
Yeah.
It all just got shut down
And canceled.
and or postponed.
Hmm.
And I don't think anyone anticipated how long this would go for.
For sure.
I know the juniors were saying at the end of last school year they felt so sorry for the seniors that they weren't going to have a normal year.
Yeah.
And a normal graduation, and thinking back now, that's you guys, right?
Yeah.
And you've had anything but a normal year. It's
for sure.
you've been more impacted than last year's seniors by a long way.
Yeah.
So as I think about this year with the restrictions on mask wearing, with the restrictions on pods, season one didn't have a season at all.
No, they
in terms of competitive games, they practiced for almost 6 months,
Yeah.
and we kept delaying with the hope that things would change. Things finally changed after the Western New Year, where pod sizes increased to 8, and then the communication sometime in January allowed schools to intermingle in fixed groups. So
Yeah.
we were able to do that for season 2, for most season 2 sports, rugby excluded. And then it was great last week we were able to get one friendly competition for our season 1 athletes.
Oh yeah, I saw the soccer had some
Yeah,
games. Yeah.
so that even though they did not have regularly scheduled games or events, it was good to get them one thing.
Yeah, for sure.
It was great to watch the teams farewell their seniors and those students who are departing. Yeah, so certainly everything's changed as far as athletics goes. The basketball is 4-on-4, volleyball's 4-on-4, touches, everything's 4-on-4, right? Some sports have been more impacted than others, like tennis and badminton
Can resume kind of normally.
are kind of normal.
Yeah. So would you say then, have you worked closely with the government and like people like that to make this happen?
Sure. I wouldn't say I worked closely.
Right.
We've been liaising with them
Mm.
to identify and declare what our intentions are. So we the umbrella organization that oversees international schools here in Singapore is the CPE. So what we do is we send them letters and applications for permission to do certain things. And one of the letters that we sent was our intention to resume co-curriculars with other schools in fixed groups. So we had to identify a roster. We had to say what the safe management measures that would be employed would be. So as an example here at SAS, visiting teams need to be temp checked, and they need to do a declaration that says they haven't had any fever or whatever
Right.
else, and the visiting school manages that. And then when they arrive, they're greeted by someone, they're walked directly to the venue, they sit in separate pods, and those who aren't participating in sport have to wear masks. Those who are on the court or the field, they get to compete against a group of 4 of SAS students, and they just rotate through that.
Okay.
During the event, there's someone supervising who manages the safe distancing and the enforcement of mask wearing. Coaches are masked the whole time. There's a limit to how many participants you can have in indoor venues. So one thing that was particularly challenging was during a basketball or even last Friday for a volleyball game, the max is 50, including the players. So we're having to lock a whole bunch of doors and have an iPad counter at the main entrance and someone manning it or running it so that we didn't go over that 50-person cap.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, my job's completely different.
Yeah.
Leading up to a normal game, which in a different year is relatively easy to schedule. We're having to talk about which pot of four we're grouping with the opposition's pot of four, how many players they're bringing. So, in basketball we had a team of 12. If the opposition could only bring 11, it'd mean the last pod would be impacted in a certain way, and that's something that in a different year you wouldn't have to worry about. Like if a team came to a game with 11 and we had 12, it didn't matter because you just have one less sub. This year it mattered a lot.
So would you say the little things you wouldn't think mattered are now like kind of a pain, like especially when you say
I mean it's a pain that's worth going through, right? Because it means
for sure.
people can play. It's certainly it adds a number of steps to our usual workflow. I think one of the silver linings though is, and I'll talk about touch or basketball, because you're broken up into pods of 8, and so there's 4 from our team, 4 from the other team. In a normal year for basketball, like the starters and the I suppose I'll use the word more experienced, stronger players would typically get more playing time. And this year everyone got the exact same minutes because it's your pot of 4 versus another pot of 4. You would play for 4-minute quarters and then you're off. And so the 9th, 10th, 11th and 12th players on a basketball team are getting the same number of minutes as the top 4. And that's great for those players, right? Because in a normal year that may look completely different. And also those 9th, 10th, 11th and 12th players, they're playing the end of a game. Right? So if a game is close, what a coach would usually do is they would use their professional judgment and say, these are the best 5 to put in the game right now to close out this game. Now it's your 4 that's on the court is your 4 the whole way through a game. So those 4 are responsible for every aspect of their game. And they're getting a chance to win a game with a buzzer beater or lose a game with a free throw or make those decisions that perhaps they haven't been in that they haven't experienced being in that position, which is really cool, right?
For sure.
For those players. So I guess for me that's a really nice silver lining that everyone had the same experience.
That's great. That's so nice that they're able just to kind of because I know especially for the rugby, if we did play 4v4, I think it would be really good because for the JV kids especially, because I know with JV and stuff it's kind of it's very hard to play a lot of games and stuff. And even in varsity you can't sub everyone. So some kids might just not play a whole game, but even here when we tried our best to play 4v4 and stuff like that, it felt like a lot of people that kind of weren't as skilled and stuff were able to develop a lot quicker just because they were in the game. So I think it is a nice positive out of such a big negative.
For sure. And I think the coaches were really thoughtful of making the experience still positive for anyone leaving, with the view to also develop the players for next year. So, I think they did a good job balancing that. I definitely do feel for the rugby team because at this point in time they're the only group that we haven't been able to organize a game for, and that's due to the rule that there's still no prolonged contact tackling and competition for that type of contact sport.
Do you think there's any other sport that might be like that? Because I feel like it would be quite hard for baseball and softball.
Yeah, baseball and softball are going to struggle. We struggle to get competition at the best of times, and now it doesn't look like the local schools and clubs are going to be willing to come because of the large team sizes for those two sports. So I think they're going to struggle as well.
Yeah.
Badminton and golf and track and field, on the other hand, will be relatively
Yeah.
easy.
So, do you think then in the future, like, do you think like you said with track, like you could have a track meet,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
you could.
yeah.
Like, do you think in the like future, like, because now like Singapore's kind of they've eased up a little bit more, like like in the future, like can you see it getting back to normal by this time next year?
This time next year, I think a good result. And again, I'm just thinking out loud, right?
Yeah.
Um, I'm not Nostradamus. I can't predict the future.
Yeah.
I think a good result for this time next year would be, well, a really good result would be resumption of travel in the region, so that we could have an IASIS. That would be a really, really good result. I think what I would hope for and think could actually come to fruition is normal on-island competition with enlarged pods. So I think by this time next year, if pod sizes go to something like 20,
Yeah, then you could play games for any sport, right?
yeah,
That'd be
and
great.
I'd hope that the rugby team would be able to have games by
Yeah.
January, February next school year. Yeah, those are my hopes. I think Singapore is being super conservative
Yeah, for
because
sure.
things are under control here, and a lot of the world isn't under control. I think they'll be.
Continue it.
They'll continue it for the foreseeable future. But yeah, I think by this time next year, I'd hope to have on island competition.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're
Mr.
welcome.
Davis. That
Yeah,
was a great
thanks
talk.
for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Sean.